So when I make my videos, I try not to be too negative regarding BFDI opinions. People in this community really don't like it when you criticize stuff a lot, a lesson which I've had to learn a few times by now. That's why when after TPOT 23 came out, I was pretty worried about the video I prepared, the one where I rant about the elimination. Surprisingly enough though, not only did people seem to agree with me, but when I took a look at what the community was saying, it seemed like the general consensus was to hate on the episode. I've already talked about the voting results, so I'll jump straight to the second most popular criticism, which is in regards to the pacing. TPOT 23 was a whopping 40 minutes long, but with just how many quick cuts and totally different storylines there was, it honestly felt more like 20 minutes. It really seemed like something new was happening every moment. In fact, I even counted the amount of separate plotlines there was, and there's about 10. Doing some simple division, we can see that this averages out to only 4 minutes of screen time for each one. You really can't tell much of a story in 4 minutes, so the writers trying to just feels like them biting off more than they can chew. A common defense I've seen for the pacing is that it's kind of the point. This is the first episode in a trilogy, so things are starting off pretty chaotic to eventually converge in on the finale. This makes sense on paper, but the way things were done here just don't match that at all. By the end of the episode, we're no closer to a solid conclusion than when we began. In fact, most of the runtime was spent splitting up all of the characters even more than they already were. If the whole point is to defeat one anyway, why do we need like 10 separate groups of characters? The only real important players here were the people who, she was chasing. From what we saw, it seemed like those guys could take her down pretty easily just by themselves. That brings me to my next major criticism: why was 1 so nerfed? Again, this is a sentiment that has been widely expressed by the community, and I know it was one of the most damaging parts of the episode for me too. I try to suspend my disbelief a little bit when it comes to BFDI, but when they've been hyping up a villain for more than half the season, it feels pretty lackluster when she's easily packed up by just normal contestants. Seriously, if you put 1 in a room with Ruby, Winner, and X's elbow, it really looks like the latter would win, at least based on what we saw here. Now, once again, there's a few defenses for this issue that it would be unfair to not mention. Firstly, it was kind of mentioned in the episode how 1 doesn't want to do the same thing that she did to 3 to anyone else.
I don't think she wants a repeat of 3. She just needs to get to X.
Now, instead of this ever being expressed by 1 herself, we get this interesting bit of lore from an entirely different character who really doesn't know 1 that well. Like, how does 2 really know this? From their perspective, 1 has literally erased several of the contestants from existence. I would argue that's even worse than what she did to 3. If I were 2, I would reasonably assume that 1 is going to stop at nothing to get the power, and I wouldn't be making excuses for her. This whole concept is never even confirmed by the villain herself, so logically we don't even know if this is why she didn't just obliterate everyone. Another defense I've seen is that 1 doesn't know how to use her powers very well. This kind of makes sense, although I feel like she should have a pretty good practice over the months that have passed since episode 19. She apparently hunted down and destroyed the planets of every other number, so taking out a few objects should still be light work. Next up, I want to talk more specifically about 3. I might do a more focused video on this subject, but in short, I really don't like what they've done with this character. Back in TPOT 20, she was characterized as a kind, helpful, and charming person. This directly contradicted how she'd been portrayed as some weird, mysterious creature back in episode 15. Now, they're antagonistic, overdramatic, and angry. I get the whole point is that she's been all corrupted or whatever, but I just wish they'd keep doing something unique with the concept instead of this corny screaming thing. I don't like to be the guy who calls everything cringe, but this just felt like it was trying way too hard to be all edgy and mature. In reality, it was just really annoying how she was screaming, and it feels like they've wasted the entire concept trying to cram 3's screen time into this already packed episode. It especially doesn't work when every other scene around this one was some silly, chaotic nonsense. It just ruins the whole serious tone. Now, overall, do I think TPOT 23 was bad? No. It was entertaining, it was fun, and as always, the animation was really good. It's just that the writing can really take you out of the immersion and make you question what the thought process behind it even was. I'm certainly happy that people are starting to wake up to some of the big flaws in TPOT, but ripping this episode apart is definitely way too much. It wasn't even near the top 5 worst ones, and I think the criticism needs to be instead redirected to the whole season instead of just TPOT 23.